how does this thing get decided that where do the case get fought? Because a lot of time what happens is that people in India, like people like me, we are interacting with an organization which we think is an Indian organization.
Yes.
But it is headquartered, let's say, it is headquartered in, let's say, Dubai, sometimes in Singapore, or some tech sevens, right? Very interestingly, I think there was a case of Vodafone which happened, right, wherein the entire game changed because they went to the international court.
I generally send a very strong legal notice, and many a times I've noticed my legal notice is good enough, and we are able to, even for large companies, we're able to get the results that we want. And then in the end of the notice, we also write, if you are willing to settle the dispute without going to court, we have instructions. We will act as the negotiators and we will sit and settle the dispute for you.
Let's say someone comes to you and they are saying that, they want to file a case, and you try to settle that down and it doesn't get settled. And you now, kind of sue the other party and you file a case. What is this process like now from here on till the time it actually happens? If you can just probably simply tell some steps, how does it work?
It is ridiculous, and I actually work mostly with foreign clients. A Malaysian client who paid 32 lakhs to buy those N95 masks. He paid the entire money, and at that time, things were at the brink of. You remember when things were completely closed up? We're at that brink. It may happen, may not happen. So the Malaysian client told the Indian supplier, only if you're 100% sure that you can send the masks to Malaysia, I will pay you, otherwise I will not pay.
इस वीडियो में मैंने बात की है सुशीला मैम से। सुशीला मैम एक बहुत ही ज़्यादा फेमस और बहुत ही ज़्यादा एक्सपीरियंस लॉयर हैं। अगर आप इंडियन लॉ सिस्टम के बारे में, लीगल सिस्टम के बारे में जानना चाहते हैं तो इस कन्वर्सेशन को आप बहुत एंजॉय करेंगे। हमने बात करी है कोर्ट के बारे में, हमने बात करी है जजेस के बारे में, हमने बात करी है इंडियन लॉ सिस्टम के बारे में, लीगल सिस्टम के बारे में, पुलिस के बारे में, आपके राइट्स के बारे में। अगर आप एज अ कंपनी या एज अ इंडिविजुअल कोर्ट को अप्रोच करना चाहते हैं, केसेस करना चाहते हैं तो किस तरीके से कर सकते हैं, क्या प्रोसेस रहता है, यानी कि अगर लीगल सिस्टम के बारे में आप सब कुछ जानना चाहते हैं तो इस कन्वर्सेशन को आप बहुत एंजॉय करेंगे। कन्वर्सेशन देखने से पहले मैं अर्ज करूंगा कि आप चैनल को सब्सक्राइब कीजिए, वीडियो को लाइक कीजिए, अगर वीडियो अच्छा लगे तो अपने फ्रेंड्स के साथ शेयर कीजिए और मुझे कमेंट करके जरूर बताइए कि वीडियो आपको कैसा लगा। एंजॉय द कन्वर्सेशन। So I'll begin from probably things that attract audience the most, which is if someone wants to choose this career, right? And if someone wants to become a corporate lawyer, start a company for themselves, from a financial perspective, right? How rewarding is this career?
I would say now, if you compare it with when we were in the profession, there's a world of difference. But when you compare it probably with other professions, it may not be at par. There is still a struggle. There are 2-3 reasons for this. One, there is a saturation that our profession has reached a few years ago. I would say 10 years ago, we had already reached the saturation point in terms of law graduates. We have so many lawyers and there aren't enough jobs for everybody. So that's one thing. The second is there is a premier lot which is from the national law schools who seem to be bagging the real good jobs in the top tier law firms and in the top companies. So these people are very well paid. But then the rest, when you're looking at, I would say 70% of the other lawyers, then life is probably not as easy or as rosy as it would be in other professions. That's the feeling I have had for the last so many years, and it's something that continues.
Okay, so for people who had made it big, right, or people who are coming from, let's say, premium institutions, or people who have done it for long enough to now have, clients which are like big fours or very, very huge clients, right? What is the limit to which, someone can reach? I understand that, yes, 70% are still, as you said, probably not doing good enough to basically consider this as a, probably a lucrative career. But yes, from an audience perspective, what is the maximum limit someone can look at? I know it's a very vague question, but then there are doctors who would earn a lot. There are doctors who would not do that well. There are engineers who would earn a lot. There are engineers who will not do that well, right? But from in your career perspective, because I have known certain lawyers who are doing insanely well from a financial perspective, right? So if you can just share something from your experience, like what is that limit? What is that maximum someone can aim for?
Well, see, if you are a litigating lawyer and you're practicing in the Supreme Court, then your fees can even go up to 30 lakhs, 40 lakhs a hearing. That's something that's a reality. And I'm sure there are clients who even pay 1 crore for a hearing when the stakes are very high. So that's the level you can go to. Across the globe, the lawyers are the highest paid professionals, and the same applies in India. The only thing is the gap is too big. There is this 5% which is doing supremely well, and then there is the other, say, 15% that is doing reasonably well, and then a lot of strugglers. So that is there. But I think that would be something common for all professions. It's got nothing to do with just being a lawyer, right?
Yeah, correct. So I think, yeah, as I said, I mean, probably everywhere that's the case. I mean, there is this cream which does really well. Everyone aims to be in that cream, and of course, there are a few things that we'll discuss. What can someone do to probably be in that cream? But yeah, I mean, good to know, and that the scope is so high, right? Because we have seen people like someone very senior now passed away, like people like Ram Varma, who would run only few cases and he will make enough money to basically sustain such a long career and such a big law firm. And then there are people who would do lot of free cases, but then they would come on media and say that we only do maybe 2% of the cases which are like financially rewarding and that are good enough for us to kind of do all other cases for free.
Contrary to what you said about Mr. Jethmalani, it's not as if he had a few clients. He had a lot of clients. He did do his share of free work too, because I was also associated with him in the beginning of my career. And I must say, he was a very hardworking man, a man who sat at his desk at, say, 8 in the morning and continued through the day. So eventually, I feel that there are 2 or 3 factors that are important for success. One, of course, you have to have the IQ. Second is you have to be hardworking. And third, and probably the most important factor, the luck factor. If you have all 3 in the right combo, you become a Ram Jethmalani. If not, then you have a reasonable success. So it's like that.
Got it. So, ma'am, I'll move towards a little bit about your work and the kind of work that you do and the kind of things that you do. So why not just start with, you would be getting different kind of clients, right? So usually if we have to understand about your career, so just tell us that what are some common, problem statements that people would come to you for, right? So I'm sure that you handle different kind of cases, but just for people to understand what are some very common, problem statements that people would bring in and you would kind of take their cases.
As a lawyer, I've noticed, because see, as lawyers, we are troubleshooters. So people only come to us when they are in trouble. I mean, primarily. This, I think, is a very old concept. I now tell my corporate lawyers, you need a lawyer from day 1.1. You don't need a lawyer when you're in trouble. You need a lawyer to avoid the problems. And people who are sensible and who are into big businesses should always be backed by a good team of lawyer, chartered accountant, tax advisors. It's very, very important. Now, coming to your question, I think the most common thing that people approach us for is, I have been cheated. Now, cheating can be both in the criminal sense as well as in the civil sense. Now, when I say civil sense, it would be a contract between, say, a buyer or a seller, or between 2 companies. What happens? When do they come to us? I have been cheated. I was given poor goods. I was not given the money that I was supposed to pay. I exported the goods, but I never got the money. So invariably, it's always a fraud. That's the most common thing. Now, coming to the criminal aspect, again, the same thing. I did so-and-so thing. I paid so much money and I was cheated. I never got the goods. When I went to find out about the company, I saw the company never existed. So I would say the common factor, whether it's civil or criminal, it always borders on cheating, misappropriation, fraud, etc.
Okay. So so you mentioned cheating, and I'm sure you would be getting some other cases as well. So from your perspective, just for audience to get a flavor, can you talk about any interesting case or any unusual case that you would have handled that probably, people would like to know, and something that you can talk about?
Over the years, we've had so many interesting cases. it's a little difficult to pinpoint one or two. But a recent case, I would say, again, of cheating. It's something to do with cryptocurrency. You know how cryptocurrency is a big thing now. So we have a client from Germany who dealt with a Indian-based cryptocurrency website. Now, when you this particular client who's from Germany is an IT professional. He's a very senior level person. He understands the entire securities involved in IT. And in fact, that's his forte, or that's his, I would say, specialization. Now, despite having all that knowledge, he decided to deal with some cryptocurrency exchange, which is based out of India. And when he did that, he must have done his homework very thoroughly. He went through the entire website. He was assured that they had the Lloyd's insurance, and if anything went wrong, they had $100 million insurance and they were covered. And even if things went wrong, even if the insurance did not pay up, then they would ensure that they paid up. But having said that, well, obviously they would have attracted a lot of customers, including my client. Now, when my client went and started using the cryptocurrency exchange, he was not informed at any point of time that some of the features were still in the beta stage. Now, beta stage essentially means they are still in the trial stage. Now, if you are in the trial stage and you are looking at monetary, you are looking at doing business in several crores of rupees, the exchange has a responsibility to inform its customers that, look, we are at the beta stage. If you're doing it at your own risk. We are informing you. But they were very silent about the whole thing. As a result of which, this gentleman lost something like 8 crores of rupees. And when he went back, now see, in today's day and age, with this faceless world, everything is over a phone call or over email. So you really can't interact with anybody. And sadly, it happened to him during the Corona days, when things were even more difficult. He lost his money. He kept writing to them, but he was smart enough. He works with one of the top German companies in Germany. He was smart enough to record everything. So we have all the proof that it's a pure and simple case of cheating. And like I said, again, another case of cheating. So we are now fighting him out, but in a criminal matter in India. And eventually, I think because there's an arbitration clause that talks about arbitration in Singapore, for civil resolution of dispute, he has to go to Singapore. But then that is how it is. So this is a very interesting case where they make representations, where they give you the assurances that, yes, use my website, it's safe, it's good. But eventually, when you use it, see, there's a big fraud. And the best part is, over an exchange of emails prompted by us, he was able to get an admission from them that it was at the beta stage. So we know we'll win. But the problem in India is the time it takes. That is the biggest glaring defect of our legal system.
So, ma'am, interesting enough that you mentioned that, the litigation was supposed to happen probably in Singapore, or like this guy is from Germany, is using an Indian, kind of website or a company to do all these transactions. How does this thing get decided that where do the case get fought? Because a lot of time what happens is that people in India, like people like me, we are interacting with an organization which we think is an Indian organization.
Yes.
But it is headquartered, let's say, in, let's say, Dubai, sometimes in Singapore, or some tech sevens, right? Very interestingly, I think there was a case of Vodafone which happened, right? Wherein the entire game changed because they went to the international court, right? And again, the Indian lawyers or the Indian organization which was asking for a lot of texts from them, that couldn't be recovered. Again, the case is still in progress, but then again, the case was not able to get a closure because again it went into international law, right? So how does a person like me, a normal outsider, know that if something goes wrong, where will this case be fought eventually?
So that's the reason why, Ishaan, by and large, we are working with international clients. We work with clients from New Zealand to US. So we are doing the entire spectrum. Now, by and large, we whenever we are drafting a contract, we always press this point on the client that jurisdiction is extremely important, because if tomorrow you have a dispute and you want your money back, you have to be clear as to which jurisdiction, that is, which area you are going to be fighting your battle in. So that jurisdiction, you have, as per the law and as per several Supreme Court judgments, parties have a right to decide where they would like to fight their battles, or how they would like to fight their battles, or what is the law that they will be following. That option is there. But many a times that option is not there. People, for instance, it's a plain and simple, say, an export contract. You export the goods from India, and you are, and sometimes you even make a high sea sale, and you make the high sea sale and the goods go to, say, Russia. Now, in such a case, what do you do? So then when there is no contract between the parties, then you have to decide about where the cause of action took place. That is, where the goods were produced, where the goods were supplied from, where the contract was finalized, okay? And also where the person who's doing business stays. That's in the civil realm. But in the criminal law, wherever the cause of action has happened, like for instance, this particular case, I have sued them in Bombay because that exchange has its office in Bombay. So we have chosen that. Now for criminal law, it will be where the cause of action has partly or wholly arisen. Now, internet being internet, it's a seamless world. But because they're based out of India, and that too in Mumbai, I have the option of going to a Mumbai court. But that's in a criminal matter. But because there is, when you go to that, go to any website and you click on the I agree, that I agree would probably have a dispute resolution clause. And in that dispute resolution clause, they would write that the laws of so-and-so country will apply, and the dispute has to be decided in ABC place. So as per that, you are bound because you have already signed that contract when you have clicked on I agree. So as per that particular terms and conditions, you have to go to Singapore.
Okay. So I think something that came in my mind while listening to your answer. So there is a person, you would have probably heard about Ashnil Grover. He was in Shark Tank, and then he was giving he was in some, I think, IIT or somewhere, and he was addressing the students, and someone asked him a very interesting question. So this guy said that when we join an organization, and it is happening in big organizations also, we have this something which is called as a notice period. Like you have to serve like a 2-month or a 3-month notice period. And a lot of times, either the candidate won't want to serve because he has got a job somewhere and they are requiring him to urgently be available, or the organizations would basically say that if you don't want to serve a notice period, you can simply, go. So Ashnil Grover answered and he said that, even though you have signed this contract, which says that you're okay with a 2-month notice period, if you say that I'm not going to come to office from tomorrow and you join some other organization, there is no legal obligation on you. You can easily go and join some other organization. Being a legal expert, I just want to ask you that it happens with a lot of cases these days that people join an organization, they don't serve a notice period, and they join another organization. Is there any legal foundation on these people?
Absolutely. There is a contract. The employer can take them to court. And that is the reason why many big companies, including the Tatas, have a clause, they have a bond in which they make the employee sign the bond, so that in case the employee decides to go, they are liable then to pay compensation. Because you have to understand, I mean, you are running your own business. You know how much time we spend in grooming each candidate that comes to us. It's a lot of time. And it's not always, just the people below you who are trading. Even you are spending very valuable time making that person understand everything. Now, what about the value of your time? That you cannot put a value. I mean, he may be getting a salary of 50,000, but your time is your time. You know how much your time, what value your time must be having. So this, and I have noticed, and it's not just in my profession, I have noticed it in several other professions. There is a tendency for the youngsters to want to jump. They feel I've been here for 6 months, I've learned everything, which is, I think, one of the most silly things that anybody can do. But that's a very common thing. They just want to go up, they just want to move on. But moving, I mean, they have probably not heard that a rolling stone gathers no moss. And that is what is going to happen to them. They will
Okay,
be
so legally,
legally, yes, you can take action.
okay, great. So I think Ashneer was wrong probably, because I think
He
that got a
was.
lot of, yeah, he got a lot of, likes on that, because a lot of people are saying, okay, now they can probably move wherever they want to. But of course, there's something that you have signed, you are kind of obliged to follow that.
Absolutely. And even if you've not signed, but your employment letter says that you have to
Yeah.
give 2 months notice, you're bound by it. If you don't give, then you pay the 2 months salary. And if you've signed a bond, then, well, of course, you have to go by the terms and conditions of the bond.
Fine. So I'll come to something now, which I very recently noticed. So I was in Europe last month, and there was this case which happened in front of me. My driver who was driving, he basically crossed the red light, and he was stopped by a policeman, right? So what happens in India, like if a policeman stops you, and without, generalizing and kind of putting it in a wrong manner, that the way a policeman would behave with a commoner, it's not, for a lack of better word, it's not good, right? So usually you would get a lot of flags. Sometimes you will see that a policeman is hitting a rickshaw wala or an auto wala with a, but the way in Europe this policeman was handling a taxi driver, it was very much with respect. So yes, he has done something wrong, he has to pay now for it, but that's it. Like, it was a very, exchange kind of a relationship. So I want to understand from you that in India, we see a lot of policemen giving a lot of flack and, kind of also hitting a lot of these people when they are kind of coming in contact with them. Is it legal for a policeman to hit someone or make a physical attack on someone or maybe abuse someone? Or is it not legal? Because it's very common in India, specifically if you look at.
To a certain extent, I would say it's not really legal, but much would depend on the circumstances. I mean, if somebody is driving in a very rash and negligent manner and he can not only kill himself but kill others, then maybe the policeman would be justified. But sometimes, the police are taking out their frustration. There was a time when it's a very small incident, but it changed my perspective of Delhi police. I had gone somewhere and my car was parked in a particular area and the driver was there. And I remember when I was getting out of the car, I think this was in the Hoskas market. And when I was getting out of the car, I told the driver, park the car carefully so that the police, because they were very strict in that particular area, so that you don't, get a ticket. And when I came back to the spot, I saw no car. Then when I called him, he said, ma'am, I'm at the police station. I said, why are you in the police station? He said, the car was towed. I told them, ma'am has just gone to a stationery shop to pick up something. She'll be here shortly, but they did not listen. So, he was very frightened and they must have really, given him they must have spoken to him harshly. So I said, don't worry, I'll come to the police station, don't worry. So I went to the police station, I spoke to the people over there, and that was the first time I had a, one-to-one interaction with the police in the police station. And then I spoke to them. They said, madam, we will let your car go. We will let the driver go. We brought him just because we were, pulling other cars too. And though your car had the Supreme Court sticker, we still brought the car to the police station. But please understand our limitations. There is such a huge population. There are so many people we have to deal with. We can't let anybody go. So that's when I realized how difficult enforcement is, even for the police.
Yeah. No, of course it is, ma'am. So I think there are probably mixed opinions of people when they interact with the policeman. I have had some very good experiences also. I lost a laptop and then I was kind of going back to the same place again and again. The policeman even carried me on his bike and showed me all the webcams and everything. And then there are cases which are not that good as well. My major question and my major perspective was to understand how legal it is for a policeman to slap you, because sometimes it happens that they just kind of act in anger, or in, like, as you said, they're dealing with so many people. Can someone go back and tell them that you can't hit me, at least?
Definitely. And now with the media playing such a big role, the police are very hesitant. In fact, now even beating criminals behind lockups is something which they are being a little careful about. I mean, you would be aware of that, right?
Yeah. And what about arrest? So usually we see that, like a lot of arrest would happen, and sometimes even like a lot of political parties have made a lot of big case around it, that the arrest happened at night, they should not have arrested, or there was no proper arrest warrant with the police. Just want to understand from an outsider perspective, if a police has to arrest someone, what is the right legal way of making that arrest? Is there some time when they can arrest you? Is there some warning that they have to give you, or like it can happen like anytime that they want to do it?
If it's a heinous crime, suppose it's a rape or it's a murder or something equally bad, then I don't think they would be looking at the time. Then they can go at any point of time. Yes, they definitely need a warrant. And then they can arrest. Much would depend on whether it's cognizable or non-cognizable. That is whether the police can need the permission of the magistrate, or they could just go and arrest. But timelines, I think, would be more important if it came to arresting a woman. I think in a case like that, it would really get out of hand if they went at the wrong time. But generally, if it's a heinous crime, I don't think you can look at 5 o'clock in the evening or 6:30 in the evening. Okay. So
And do they need a arrest warrant for sure, like we see in movies, or they can arrest without a warrant also?
no, arrest warrant is important. A search warrant is important if you have to search a place. You can't just go in.
Okay, fine. So now we'll come to a little bit on the kind of things that you are dealing on a day-to-day basis. My first question to you in this respect is that, let's say I have to file a case, right? And I approach you. And as you said rightly, that people are very afraid of approaching lawyers or filing a case. They think it will keep going on, which will come to. But what is the exact process of, doing or probably filing a case? When I say process, I mean, let's say I approach you and you say, okay, there's something on which we should, file a case. From there on till the time a judgment would come, right? What is the process that someone is looking at? And I know it's a very big timeline, but if you can just talk a little bit about, that if I have to probably sue someone, what is the timeline usually that I'm looking at from me filing a case to finally something happening around it?
Now, if you're talking about closure at the Supreme Court, that can take 30 years. And that is my experience. And that is what we have learned every week after week, because we have a blog and we keep writing about recent important cases. So every case that attains finality takes a minimum of 30 years. That's my experience. Now, coming to your other point, if somebody approaches me for a case, what do we do? Well, first we hear whatever the litigant has to say or whatever happens. Then we ask for the document, because in law, documentary evidence is much more important than oral evidence. So we look at the documents to see exactly where the prospective litigant is heading. Then based on that, we advise them as to how they can go about. Then we collect the documents, we prepare the case, then we of course send them the draft, they look at it, and that whole process goes on till it's filed in court. Now the thing is, what I have started since 2017, after seeing the length of time that we take for closure, I advise all clients who walk into my office, be it a startup, be it a high net worth individual, be it an individual, be it a $1 billion company, that let us first try and settle. Sometimes they look at me like, has she gone mad? Why is she talking about settlement? We want to sue. But I have seen the other side of the picture, so I know how long it's going to take. So I actually sit and counsel them. If they agree with me, I generally send a very strong legal notice. And many a times I've noticed my legal notice is good enough. And we are able to, even for large companies, we're able to get the results that we want. And then in the end of the notice, we also write, if you are willing to settle the dispute without going to court, we have instructions. We will act as the negotiators and we will sit and settle the dispute for you. Now, this way, I know I may not earn that much money as I would earn if I had continued with the litigation. But see, I earn something which is more important. I earn their respect, and I always get reference. And most importantly, the case is closed for good. Isn't that a better way to do things?
Yeah, no, of course it is. But are people doing it often? Because what I understand from people who have, so I know someone in my family who has fought a case and it got closed after 12 years now. It was a case of a suicide that happened in his family. And there was no case at all, but they built it up for 12 years and they closed it. And his point was that the government lawyer would not come basically, for the hearing, and it will keep going on, and then the judges will get changed, and your lawyer itself kind of keeps putting it one after the other. Does it happen quite often, or like most people are doing the way you are doing?
No, I would say I'm one of those very few people who is trying to settle the matter. Actually, for me, the motto in our office is we are reliable, we are responsible, we are resourceful. So I would say that my trying to settle this entire dispute is part of my being resourceful. And I always feel that the best interest of the client is what one should look at. As a professional, anyone walks into my office, I must see what his or her best interest is. Now, I know that the best interest of the client is to settle. I know that even after fighting our litigation for 10 years or 12 years in one court, I may still have to settle. So I would have made my money, right? But eventually we would still have to settle. So I explain this to them. Many a times they are like, absolutely, especially if it's $1 billion company and you take this to them and you say, let us try to settle. Sometimes they say, Mrs. Varma, what are you saying? And I tell them I'm saying this because I know my legal system. So many a times they don't agree, but then later they themselves say you were right.
We will come to some of the things that you said, interesting enough, about the time it takes and why it takes. But I'll come back to my earlier questions. Let's say someone comes to you and they are saying that they want to file a case, and you try to settle that down, and it doesn't get settled. And you now kind of sue the other party and you file a case. Mm-hmm. What is this process like now from here on till the time it actually happens? If you can just probably simply tell some steps, how does it work?
Sure. Now, see, recently in 2015, for all commercial disputes, they started with something called the Commercial Courts Act, which is a shortcut to try and resolve disputes as soon as possible. There's a timeline of 1 year. But of course, this timeline has not been followed. But what happens in that case is something which in that particular law is something that is very close to my heart. In that also, if you go for a commercial dispute, the court says, before you come to me, go to a mediator and try and resolve the dispute. If you can do it, fine. If you can't, then get me the non-starter report and then you file the case and I will hear you. So This is something that's really good. Now, assuming that the mediation has failed, then you would go and file a plaint. Basically, you're asking me the step-by-step process, right?
Yeah.
So you would file your case, which would be called a plaint. Then the court would give the other side an opportunity to meet all your averments that you've made in the plaint, and they would file a written statement. Then you would have a chance to reply to the written statement by filing a replication where you say whatever you have to say. And both sides have to file the documents that they are relying on. Now, I just told you a short while ago that in law, documentary evidence is much higher than oral evidence. So all the documents are filed, after which the documents, both sides are given a chance to admit or deny the documents. Like, for instance, you send me a letter. When I'm in court, I can either admit that, yes, this is a letter that I have received from you, but I do not agree with, but I do not admit the contents. Or you can just simply say, I do not admit the document. Once that is over, then the court will frame the issues. Now, issues would mean the points on which the entire case will be argued and decided. Now, once that is done, then the trial begins. Now, when you say the trial begins, what does that mean? It means the plaintiff's witnesses will be examined and cross-examined. Similarly, the defendant's witnesses will be examined and cross-examined. And after that, both parties will have a chance to have the final arguments, which is what is known as the trial. And then court passes the judgment. Now, after the judgment is passed, obviously the winning side will be may be happy or may not be happy, but the losing side invariably goes in appeal. And that's how the matter keeps going on, and that tariq pe tariq happens.
Okay. So where is this first hearing happening? Like what level of court? Is it like a district court, or where is this happening?
It would depend on the value of the suit. In most parts of India, it will happen in the district court, but places like Delhi High Court and all, they have a pecuniary jurisdiction. So if you fall, say, within the 1 crore, then you go to the low courts. If it's more than that, then you go to a certain court. So courts are decided. It will depend on which court has to hear the matter.
Okay. So interestingly enough, you mentioned like district court, Delhi High Court and all. For most of the people probably listening to this, all they have seen of a court is that are in some movies, right? Like hum dekhte hain wo kis type ke movies mein things are happening and all. From your perspective, because you have seen it in and out, how close the real courts are to the courts that we see in movies, and if they are not close, what is happening inside a court? Like how is the overall environment like? Because you mentioned a very important thing before you were giving the answer. You said that initially one party would come and examination would happen, then the other party would come, examination would happen, then the together will come, and then cross examination will happen. But we never see that. We always see that both parties are there together in a movie, right? So how different is the real court from the courts that we see in movies?
I would say it's like day and night. There's such a difference, number one. Number two, it's a dramatization. So whatever is shown as an argument will be overtly dramatized. It will have a lot of theatrics, a lot of acting, a lot charged with emotions. It doesn't happen like that in the court to begin with. And also, I would say that when you are arguing in court, you really don't get so much into theatrics. You're more on the evidence. What is it that's helping you to win the case? What is it that is against the other side? So those things are never shown. So like I said, it's a dramatization, and the difference in simple language is day and night. So what they show you is day, what really happens is night. And each hearing takes a lot of time and very, it's a very long drawn process. It doesn't happen so quickly that in one shot they show he's in jail, and the next shot they show that final arguments have happened and he's out.
So how long is a normal hearing? Usually like an average hearing, how long would that go?
You mean a final hearing or a normal hearing?
No, normal hearing. Yeah.
Normal hearing, sometimes it can even just take 2 minutes, and sometimes it can take 10 to 15 minutes. Sometimes it can take half an hour. Much would depend. See, between the filing of those, the plain, the written statement, the replication, you have things called interim applications in which you are praying to the court for certain reliefs. The plaintiff could be doing it, the defendant could be doing it. The plaintiff could be saying that I fear that he will move away from the jurisdiction of the court, so attach his property so that tomorrow if I win, I'm not left with a paper decree. I should have something concrete. So, things like that. Then they move an application, the other side files a reply, you file a rejoinder, then you argue. Now, whenever there's arguments, it could take anything between half an hour to 1 hour.
Okay.
And if it is just a simple hearing where you are taking time to file a reply or a rejoinder, it would take 2 minutes. So it's like that. And cross-examination sometimes can take very long. I have done cross-examinations in which I have really shaken some people and taken 3 to 4 days. I remember there was, yes, and in an arbitration, I remember in an international arbitration, I had cross-examined the CEO of a very big infrastructure company. And by the time it was over, he was completely shaking. He never thought that I could be so difficult. And those people were dangerous people, the ones I was cross-examining. But I always feel, give it your best shot. That's what the client wants out of you. And that is.
So I've seen 2 court hearings, both on, when I say 2, I mean 2 set of court hearings, both on online which is now available. So I think a lot of Supreme Court hearings are now coming online live. You can see, I think have started from COVID or sometime. Then there was a very famous case which happened about Johnny Depp, which was happening outside, and lot of YouTube coverage was there. So interestingly enough, I have seen that in some of these hearings that are happening in India, the judge gets a lot angry on the lawyers sometimes, right? How often does that happen? Like, does the judge gets angry on the lawyers, and or is it like something very rare that is happening?
Well, to put it very simply, actually, my experience is mostly in the High Court and the Supreme Court. I don't go so much to the trial court. I mean, of course, my team goes to the trial court, but the theatrics and all happen more in the lower court. I mean, there are cases when people have flung their shoes at the judge in sheer frustration, a litigant has flung it. Then there are cases where the judge has reprimanded or shouted at them. This happens, I think, more in the lower court. But even in the higher courts, I have noticed that, yes, there are clients who are very pushy and they want to tell the judge what they have to, they want to bypass the lawyer. Then at times like that, I have noticed judges getting irritated and saying, now you keep quiet, you have to be, you are represented by counsel, so wait for them to say. But these people go on. Then I've seen judges get angry and say, we'll impose costs or we'll throw you out of the court if you insist. So that has happened. And in the Supreme Court, I would say they are too much at the top for anybody to really get into all that. But there have been cases. There was one case which touched me. There was an old man. It was not my case. I was just sitting in court waiting for my matter. He came to, I think it was the Chief Justice of India then, and he folded his hand and he said, can I have a word? Can I say something to you, my lord? So the judge said, yes, tell me. So he just folded his hand and he said, my बाप मैं तो पिछले 30 साल से ये केस लड़ रहा हूँ और कब तक लड़ना है मुझे. So there are cases like this when the human element comes out and even the judges feel, so they also feel that, yes, let us hear him out. Sometimes it's, there are some very good judges who actually feel that the litigant has come so far, so we should give them a fair hearing. One of them is was a very famous Chief Justice of India called Justice R.C. Lahoti. In fact, he was in this matter, the Vodafone. He was chosen as the arbitrator. So I had the chance to do some international arbitrations with him. And he was, in my opinion, one of the finest judges that I have seen in my career. Very humane in his approach. He would have made up his mind, but he gave the other side, both the sides, the satisfaction of knowing that whatever hard work I've done, at least somebody has listened to me. That's a very important aspect. So he used to make people walk away from his court with the feeling of satisfaction. Chalo, sunwai to hui hai. So that's an important aspect.
Okay. So, ma'am, you mentioned like some judges are more human, some judges would be more pragmatic in their approach.
And some very arrogant.
Some very arrogant in their approach. At the end of the day, we probably forget that those are humans deciding a human case, right? So for a senior lawyer like you or people in your shoes, would you study a judge before you go to a case, because you know the kind of approach or kind of mindset that a judge would have, or it's always very pragmatic and you would just go by the law?
No, especially if I argue in different high courts. I go to Bombay, I go to Kolkata, I go to Chandigarh. So wherever I'm required to go, because sometimes the client insists that no, you'll have to go and argue. So in a case like that, I always go one day before the matter and I sit in the courts, court and see how the mind of the judge works. Based on that, I argue the next day. Because it's all a human approach, isn't it? So you know somebody will be going by the book, so you give him by the book. You know somebody likes to hear something humorous when you're arguing, so you give him something humorous. You know somebody is going to only he's a no-nonsense type. You just tell me what you have to and go. You do that. So that is
So
called
it's,
craft.
yeah,
That
so
is
it's
called
preparation
craft.
as well.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
definitely. Especially for when you're going to foreign courts, in the sense that a court where you're not practicing every day. So over there, it's extremely important that you should go and watch your judge before you start arguing.
And how different are the courts and the way courts operate in India and abroad? Are they same everywhere?
No, certainly not. The system overseas is phenomenal. You go to these large courts and you see just a few people. And then sometimes the first time I went, I remember the first time I went to a foreign court, I think it was in Australia. And it was a huge premises in Sydney. And I went and I saw maybe just 20 people. So I asked somebody who was walking up the stairs, some lawyer, are you on holiday today? Because we are used to places teeming with people. You see people everywhere. So I asked somebody, is there a holiday today? They said, no, the courts are functioning. So obviously I went and sat in one of the courts. And would you believe it? It's like just you, me, and another 5 people. That's the court. And they're hearing a final hearing. So the system over there is very good, which is what we should ideally be having. Like I explained those stages to you, the plain, the written statement, the replication. Now the judges over there, they say parties will file all their pleadings. They will lead their evidence. There will be a commissioner who will hear the evidence on both sides, give me everything together, and I as a judge will only listen to the final hearing, or maximum the cross-examination and the examination in chief. And I will hear the trial. And how many days do you want? So you say you want 10 days, they give you 10 days. You block your calendar, they block their calendar, they may give it to you 3 years down the line, 1 year down the line, 6 months down the line. And your case is over.
In one hearing?
Yes. So, of course, they have the system of appeals, but one hearing could be 5 days also, it could be 10 days. But at least it's over, right? It's not year after year where the judge changes, the lawyer changes, the litigant dies, the son comes into his place, the son dies, the grandson comes into his place. But there is a continuity.
So, I think you probably coming to it. So I'll probably ask this straight away then. Then why are cases in India so slow? Because you mentioned 30 years for a case to take, and I'll probably give you a very bad example that I know from, as I was mentioning like a few minutes back. This is my cousin who basically got married around 2011 or somewhere, and unfortunately the wife attempted suicide and she died actually. And this was like within a month or within 6 months of this marriage, right? And of course, he went to jail, and then everything happened. And then eventually, the case went too bad. Like it became too bad. The parents filed it again, and eventually, what happened is that this case got over now, like a month back. It took around 12 years for this case to got over, and the parent of the person who died, who actually filed the case, they stopped coming to the courts around 10 years back. Like from last 10 years, there is no one who is coming. So he goes and there is a government appointed lawyer who comes, and sometimes the judge would change, sometimes the lawyers would change, and no one is there to basically fight the case against you, and still you're fighting for 10 years, and then eventually the judgment is happening. Why is that that we are in such a system wherein the other party is not even coming for 10 years and still the case is going on?
Actually, what happens is, if in all criminal cases, you will notice it is state versus the accused. So it will be state versus ABC, state versus XYZ, state versus etc. So what happens is you make the complaint, the police examines the complaint, it becomes an FIR, and then when it goes to court, then it is for the government to fight, not for you as the complaining to fight. You will be called once or twice for evidence in the entire process. So in the entire 12 years, the girl's parents may have come once or twice, her brother or whoever the other relatives may have come once or twice. Otherwise, it is the duty of the state, the police, or represented by public prosecutor, to fight the case, but the accused has to be available date after date after date.
Okay, but then why would the state? I understand why would a state take this, because they believe now that I mean, they have to do the justice even though someone doesn't have the might to basically fight this case. But then what I have seen from this very narrow experience of mine is that, like, people who are fighting the case on the behalf of the girl, they have probably no interest in the case. Like, there are people who coming one day and then they would skip 3 days, they would not read the document, they will come without reading the document, and then the judge will say come after 6 months and all, right? And this keeps happening. So is there something which is fundamentally wrong which should be changed in the system?
Yes, I feel there is something fundamentally wrong with our system that needs to be changed. And I have been writing to Mr. Modi time and again that if you want India shining, you want India to be in the global powers, we have to change our legal system. We cannot go on like this. It is ridiculous. And I actually work mostly with foreign clients. A Malaysian client who paid 32 lakhs to buy those N95 masks. He paid the entire money. And at that time, things were at the brink of, you remember when things were completely closed up? We're at that brink. It may happen, may not happen. So the Malaysian client told the Indian supplier, only if you're 100% sure that you can send the masks to Malaysia, I will pay you. Otherwise, I will not pay, because it is not me who's buying it. I have a back-to-back contract with a Japanese corporate. The Indian company said, yes, we can supply. They paid the 32 lakhs. They took the 32 lakhs. They did not have the masks, but they kept, delaying. So in a situation like Corona, every hour counted. Days is a different issue. So what happened was, before the masks were not ready, they promised, they took the money. By the time they organized the masks, the lockdown started. Now, who is to blame? The Malaysian client has lost 32 lakhs. I have filed a police complaint in the Delhi, in Vasant Kunj, Delhi police station. The matter is going on. Again, same story. Hearing after hearing. And that small company in Malaysia saying, ma'am, in such a big country like India, you have nothing for me. In my country, the court would have frozen his bank account. Now, that is, see the difference over here, what is happening. And I told him you have to go both in civil and criminal. But generally, I prefer to file a criminal complaint, because if the pressure is high, they settle and the matter is over for good. But in civil cases, it can go on for 30 years. But see, it's going on. After 6 adjournments, the police has finally filed an investigation report, which has so much of rubbish written in it. They are showing that the masks were ready on a day when our client had not even contacted the Indian company. So the entire case is full of lies. It's a complete, it's an open and shut case of cheating.
And there is no accountability, like someone who has filed such a wrong report from a police, and there is no accountability.
Well, now we're going to argue in August. Somebody will go and argue this. One of my senior people will go and argue this, and that's it. Then eventually we have to knock the doors of Delhi High Court to say this is what the police is doing. But the system is very slow, very, very slow.
So what are some, like, from your perspective, because you are doing this in and out, what are some 1 or 2 major changes that should happen, which would probably ensure that things would change? Because I think Chief Justice of India has said it, a lot of people have said it, when every government which comes to the power, and if they are talking about legal system, they say that, yes, we have to change it, we have to scrap some laws, but nothing happens, right? So what are some 1 or 2 pragmatic or practical things which should be done, which will probably eventually lead to, things getting better as we go along?
Well, I think first and foremost, we need to follow the pattern of the advanced countries. We need to cut short the litigation time. We can't be litigating for years at an end. It's not only the resources of the litigators, that is the plaintiff and the defendant, but also the government sources, right? Everybody's resources are being stretched beyond a certain point. Why do we need this? And whose money is going? The taxpayers' money. That is your money and my money. So first and foremost, we need to simplify the process. We need to bring it down. We need to narrow those timelines and make it just like how the advanced countries are. Keep short timelines, keep brief timelines, and be over and done. don't spend your entire life. It's not like an anniversary you're celebrating. It's not like your marriage anniversary that you have to celebrate year after year. I have filed a litigation on 20th December 2000, and now I'm having the 23rd anniversary. It's not like that. It should be over, right? So that's the first thing. Second thing is, when I've noticed one thing in places like Dubai and all, the enforcement is so good that people dare not break the law. It's so good. And I feel that if we also had that kind of enforcement, it would be amazing. Then people would not be, breaching the law. If you don't breach the law, where is the question of so many litigations? So I think our biggest problem is our population.
Yeah. So, like, just to get a perspective, like, how many cases would probably get filed in a day? Like in lakhs or crores or like thousands? What is the number?
Definitely it would be in lakhs, but I cannot give you the number offhand. But if you Google it, you can find the answer.
Yeah. So many cases like which gets filed. Do we have the sufficient number of judges to basically hear so many cases?
No, I think one thing that we should definitely do when we are trying to cut down the timelines is we should have this system which they have overseas, that if you file a frivolous litigation, you are so heavily penalized that you dare not file a useless case. In India, it's so simple. I would say it's very simple to file a criminal case against anybody, but very difficult to take it to the to the end, to the final to finality or to closure. So if you file a frivolous case overseas, you are penalized so heavily that you dare not do it. So that kind of system should come in India also.
Correct. So I think it starts probably from changing the law of how the cases are filed. When you say frivolous, I mean, yes, I mean, I've heard those stories when people would just file a case just to make your life, like such, because they have a lot of time. They have nothing to do in your life. But then from your perspective, now you have to go and attend every day because you are the accused. As you said, accused has to be, and I've seen it like with my cousin that he was there in Mumbai every time a date would happen. He would leave his job, he would come out and he would go there. And I think a lot of such frivolous cases are there where people things like that are happening. Okay, got it. Yeah, you were saying something?
No, and it is apart from just going there, see the mental trauma that the accused has to go through. He may not have been responsible for his wife's suicide. Yes, because you said 12 years, because you said that 2-3 days ago, he got the clean chit. So imagine the trauma, imagine the kind of reputation he would be suffering in his peers, in his family circle, in his friend circle. Look at this man, isne to apni biwi ko mari diya. So all these things, eventually, the 12 years of bitterness, she died, she took the exit and she took the easy way out. But what about him? He died every day for 12 years. Better look for a producer to make his movie. Let him earn something. Let him earn something. No, it's actually very trying. It's very trying.
Yeah, you're right. So, I mean, of course, like, for example, I'm taking an example of this case, but I think stands true with every case. Now, when the judge has simply, it's not like that the judge said that there is no proper evidence and let's close the case. The judge simply said that the case is stupid. Let's close it now. In such a case, the people who have filed the case, they should obviously, have to be penalized for this person to gain something. He's lost 12 years of his life. He's not married again so far.
Yes.
He was 3 years, he was in jail, coming in and out. He lost his job. He has to change his job. Such a big economic, financial, reputation loss, plus such a big loss in life as well is pushed by 10, 12 years. And now what? He's won a case that's good enough. Everyone is crying enough that, okay, now things are over. But then look at what he got now. He's not got nothing, right? He's not got financially anything and nothing has happened for him, which is kind of good enough for him to feel good about winning a case. It's just a, relentment that, okay, now the case is over, but nothing else, right? So,
but it's not only the 12 years, it's also the coming 12 years, whether he will get somebody in his life, whether every time he goes for a job interview, whether that will come as a black mark, whether people will trust him, so it goes on and on. He's lost his life. That's why I was telling you, there are 3 factors to success. And one of them is luck, and probably luck is the biggest.
And is it like that anyone who loses a case, for example, here someone has lost a case, can anyone go and file an appeal in the higher court or the next level of court, or is there some restriction on that as well?
No, they can file an appeal. Definitely, they can say that the police didn't do a good job, but much would depend on what is written in the judgment. Because you said the judge said there's nothing in the case. So in a case like this, even when you go in appeal, you have to first get your appeal admitted. So the judge will read the judgment and say, there is nothing in this. Why should I hear you? So it can get thrown out.
Okay, so ma'am, from a normal perspective, let's probably bring this question to people like you, people like me, and people outsiders. So, have you seen few things which are happening in a day-to-day life? Let's say for someone who is probably running an organization, or let's say on a criminal side also, like people who are living a normal life, that you think that probably people should appeal and kind of file cases for things for which they are not filing the cases because they believe that it will keep going on. Are there some of those things which you believe people should approach the lawyer for?
Yes, there are many times, I feel that litigation in India has something called a fatigue factor. The client gets fatigued by the sheer timelines, the sheer, the uncertainty of where it's going. Lawyers like me who are wanting to do justice and who believe in the quickest way of trying to close disputes, people like me, even I get very fatigued. Not only me, many people in my team. When I started last year, when I started writing to the Prime Minister and saying that we have to change our legal system, you have done so much for our country, this is something you have to do, and you're the only one who can do it. How many of us believed that Kashmir would get resolved? Everybody thought it was a lost case. They were able to do that. Why can't they do this? They can. So when I started this and I told some of my peer groups, some of my juniors, I was surprised, Ishaan. So many people told me, ma'am, when the crusade starts, when the work starts, we would like to be part of this. So see, what we are thinking is actually what there is. The fatigue has seeped into not only the litigants, into the lawyers also. People who are good lawyers are not interested in fighting forever.
So I'll probably come back again to the question. So are there a few things for which anyone should, like, probably you see, okay, this is absolutely wrong. Let's say I'll give you an example. So for example, a lot of times we would go and consume some food items, and I'm not talking just about corporate law. We'll go and consume some food items, and there are not proper declaration about those food items, right? And people would consume and they will get sick, and then they will do nothing. A lot of times we'll have an internet or a network connection, and we'll try to call, and the calls won't go, and we know that the network is very poor. So for example, I'm using one of the providers, and 90% of the times I know that my net will go down and my call will get dropped, but I'll not approach anyone. And sometimes I'll not do that because I don't have time. The instances are smaller. But are there such things which are happening in our day-to-day lives for which we should make a case out and we are not because of this fatigue thing?
Actually, there are many things which are now, which people are now avoiding. They only give the threat that I will take you to court, but many people are not doing it. It's very simple. Who has that kind of time? Who has that kind of money? And who are we fighting? We are fighting the big corporates. I fought a battle, my office fought a battle against Apple. Now, Apple is known for its quality. So we had bought an iMac. I had bought an iMac from Apple, and the camera was very poor. And I bought it during the Corona time because the world had shifted from real to virtual. So I needed a very good system. And the camera didn't work. So the entire exercise was an exercise in futility. Being a lawyer, I wrote to Tim Cook directly. I wrote to him that your India office has given me a third-class camera
system.
It's an inbuilt camera in the system. I don't have any problems with the system. I have a problem with the camera. Tim Cook's people called me the day I sent the email. The second day in the evening, I already got a call from somebody sitting in UK asking me what my problem was, assuring me that it would be resolved. I was very happy. I said, okay, here is a company that believes in satisfying its customers. But the Indian counterpart, they were very rigid. They kept saying, no, nothing is wrong. Now, who makes a complaint if there is no problem? I think very few people in our busy lives, I mean, forget about somebody like me, but even generally, people don't make complaints just for the fun of it. Nobody has that kind of time, right? So this iMac kept going to the Apple Service Center, kept coming back, kept going, kept coming back. And then they kept saying, no, there is nothing wrong. There is maybe you don't have enough light in your room. I said, I have 9 lights in the room where I've kept the iMac. How is it possible that I don't have light? Anyway, eventually we fought the battle. We won the battle, and Apple fought very hard, but we obviously fought harder. And you know, all that fine print which is there in every contract, which we read thoroughly, and we realized that they themselves were getting caught in their own trap by giving those assurances. So anyway, we won the case, we got the compensation, we got our full money back. And now I'm talking to you from the new system. So we got everything. But the bottom line is, how many people, I mean, many people would be tired, no?
Yeah.
And even I was getting tired after some time. My husband said, just get another camera and just put it on the computer and manage your work, which I did. But it was rankling. I said, why? Why did I pay so much? And that's it. So that is exactly what happens. And I'm a lawyer. I still feel the fatigue. Imagine how the others must be thinking. No, that's why when things like this take place, like for instance, you were saying food item went bad. So I always tell people, come in a group. If it's a class action, the court will hear you better. The company you're fighting will be more scared. That way you will get more results.
Got it. So you're saying it's important to raise voice, but raise it in a group so that your voice is like kind of heard.
India
and do people
has 1.5 billion people. So which company will bother? Okay.
Yeah. And do people get decent compensation in these cases?
Very poor. Very poor compared to the efforts they make. In fact, I was surprised in one of my international litigations, I got costs of 1 crore, which is a very big thing by Indian standards. Generally, the courts give you 10,000, 20,000. That's all. 1 lakh, max to max.
Yeah. No, we have seen that in international borders, a lot of these compensations that are given are really high. I mean, just for them to kind of make a point for the company to kind of, take right actions going in future, right? Because 20,000, even a 20 lakh or a 25,000 or those kind of small amounts basically won't matter to the company. They will just give that compensation as just take it and move on. Yes. Yeah, so that's right. Fine, ma'am. So I'll come to the last 2 questions. I think one of them is specifically on people who are listening to this and who want to be a corporate lawyer or a lawyer, let's say, from your experience perspective, what are a few things that you believe would make someone successful in this field? And specifically, I will ask in this that because now it's so much about conversation and oratory, how important is your oratory skills or your communication skills if someone wants to be a lawyer, right? If you can just answer this. And probably, yes, I have another question on top of it, that in India, people are fighting these cases. A lot of us are coming from metro cities, kind of studying in very good schools and colleges. Can we not have situation wherein people who are coming from tier 2 and tier 3 cities who are not comfortable in English, who can fight similar cases in Hindi? Because I think a lot of cases are fought in English only, specifically in Supreme Courts and all.
Yes. Now, the first part of your question is, what are the requisites to be a successful lawyer? Well, you already said it, communication skills, written as well as oral. That's very important. I think the most important contribution that to your success is always hard work. It doesn't matter which field you are in. If you are ready to put in your hard work, you are ready to give your 110%, I don't think success is very far behind. But yes, it takes time and much would depend on the profession. Law is a profession where you grow arithmetically for the first 10 years, then it becomes geometric progression. Then suddenly you are earning in lakhs and lakhs, and before you know it, you might be one of those lawyers who's earning 30 lakhs a year or 40 lakhs a year. So that is definitely there. And I don't think it matters from where you have passed out. I myself have passed out from Darjeeling, which is a very small dot in the Indian map. But I think if your schooling and your education is good, you can compete anywhere. I came to Delhi to work in the Supreme Court, and they say that wherever you're destined to earn, you will live there. And that's how I am here. So a tier 2, tier 3 city doesn't matter. But I agree with you that in the high courts and in the Supreme Court, English is a must. If you don't know English, it would be a little difficult, not impossible, but yes, a little difficult because you have to converse in English. That's the language of the court. But in the lower courts, I have been given to understand that you can talk in the vernacular, so nothing will stop them from working in such courts.
Okay, but do you think that it needs to change a little? Because having English everywhere, I understand it's a language that we are following even in academics, even in corporate. But then if the judge understands Hindi, why can't it be in Hindi? Or if a judge understands Bengali in Bengal, why can't it be in Bengali in, let's say, a high court of maybe West Bengal? Should it be, or like there are some specific reasons why it is in English?
Actually, I'm very fluent in both Hindi and English. But when I watched your podcast and I saw it was in Hindi, I was a little hesitant because legal terminology in Hindi is not so easy. So legal terminology in Bengali or in Assamese or in Telugu or in Tamil will not be so easy. How do we explain? Because the books, at the end of the day, all the course books will be in English. Your sections are in English. How do you translate everything? I don't think it's so easy. You know, every matter that comes to the Supreme Court, many times all matters come through the trial court, the high court, and then the Supreme Court. Now, when a matter is admitted in the Supreme Court, all the trial court records are brought to the Supreme Court because the judge will want to hear everything. At that time, it's a rule that you cannot file anything in the vernacular. You have to translate everything and put it in the English language and file it.
Got it. Got it. So probably starts from where the books are. I mean, if the books are written in English, if the law is in English, then probably, the way it is kind of translated in the courts also has to be in English. It can have a translation effect also. Just if you change the language, it can be very different the way it is kind of portrayed.
Absolutely.
Got it.
You see, we follow the common law pattern, which means we follow the English laws. So if our basis is the English law, right? We may be having the Contract Act in India, but our basis is the English Contract Act. So everything flows from there. How do you reverse the process? It's not so easy. And like you said, translations, you can lose a lot in translations. I'll tell you a joke. You don't have to make it part of the podcast, but there was somebody who said, Nanaji Ajmer gaye. And that particular sentence was repeated a number of times between the relatives. When it reached the fourth or fifth relative, they heard Nanaji Aaj mar gaye. And they started. So that is what happens. If translation is not accurate, the essence is lost, right?
Got it. And ma'am, you mentioned, so final thing, I think you mentioned in between somewhere that you do a blog wherein you talk about all these cases which are happening and some big cases and all. So if you want to talk a little bit about that blog, what is that blog? What can we outsiders and as well as someone who's practicing the law, what can they get from there?
Yes. So we have a blog called The Indian Lawyer. And if you go on to our website, theindianlawyer.in, you can click on blog. Now, every week we are writing 5 to 6 cases on the latest cases reported anywhere in India, depending on the importance. By and large, we are talking about Supreme Court cases because that's the final say, right? So we do that. And I had started the blog in 2016 because I felt my lawyers were not reading enough. They were not able to understand judgments. So I thought the only way to make them, to push them into understanding is I tell them that they have to read it, understand it, and make a synopsis and put it on the blog. And because quality has always been extremely important for me, I always ensured that we got the best. So over the years, I noticed their skill sets improved, but also the blog started getting very good readership. And today we are standing at number 16 in India, which is a very big thing. So and most importantly, we are getting requests from people all across the globe asking us to publish their articles in our blog. But we have to keep refusing because we say we can only write about the law. We can't write. So many a times when they are sending articles related to the law or they're trying to tell us about a case, we are publishing it. But that is how it is.
Got it. So we'll put the link in description, I think, for people who want to kind of keep abreast with, what is going on, some important cases. I think they can surely read. And of course, people from the law fraternity will definitely, find, merit in reading about it.
I would be grateful because it's important, that people should understand the law in the correct perspective. And I firmly believe that knowledge is something that you have to share. You cannot restrict it to yourself. So I'm starting a new program from July. It's going to be called Legal Tips. It will be coming on YouTube. And I will be doing a very short 1 minute talk on different aspects of the law. And I would invite people to come up with questions so that I can clear a lot of cobwebs for the common man.
Yeah.
Make it interactive.
Yeah, no, I think it's a need of the hour. Again, I think thank you so much for being on the podcast. How was your experience overall? If you would like to share, and then probably we can close from there.
I'm very happy to do this podcast with you. It has been, on the back burner for so long.
Yeah.
I was getting a little fidgety. I said, now I'm going on holiday. Before that, I need to close this. Like I said, I like to close matters. I like to keep everything in order. So I'm glad we did this, and I'm glad it is all extempo and not rehearsed. We are just talking like as if we've just met.
Correct.
And I think it's been a very good Q&A. And I hope you do get a lot of people who will view it. Please share the link with us because we have YouTube channels also, Legal Fundamentals and TIL Legal Speak. So we will put it on that, and then maybe we'll get more viewers. Okay.
Sure, ma'am. Thank you so much. Whatever comments we get, we'll share with you. And hopefully, if there is anything that people would want to ask, I'll probably try to get those answers a little bit from you and share with you people if there are some interesting comments.